In the skies above the lands between, you may catch sight of an eternal storm that covers the remains of an ancient civilization. A city that floats above, a city crumbling to time. Farum Azula. In this video, we're finally stepping into Farum Azula, and hopefully by the end of a series of videos about it, we'll find everything it holds. Now, I know a lot of people wanted me to cover Raya Lucaria next, but I'm going to need to do a new playthrough for the quest. So while I work on that next playthrough, I have to pass through Farum Azula anyway, and while I'm here, let's talk about it. Now, this is probably gonna be a topic that spans multiple videos since there's a lot to unpack. And for this first one, I want to cover the denizens of Farum Azula, who are the Beastmen, which also includes Maliketh the Black Blade, and maybe we'll touch on Placidusax? I don't know how to pronounce it. I'll just say Placidusax. We'll also touch on Queen Marika a little bit, but all of them will get their dedicated video another time. Before anything, let's talk a little bit about what Farum Azula is. Basically, it's this structure in the sky that predates the Erd Tree. But what is it exactly? We have a lot of conflicting answers. We have 3 items that call it a royal city, a mausoleum, or a temple. All could be true because Farum Azula could be much bigger than what it actually is right now. And based on what we see in Farum Azula, they likely are all true. So the only question is, how big was Farum Azula actually before, and what denizens live there? Well, like I already said, the Beastmen would be one of them, but there are other denizens as well, which we will explore in this video. But before we talk about the Beastmen in Farum Azula, let's talk about the Beastmen in the lands between. There's one we meet very early in the game. And no, not Blide, but we'll talk about him in a bit too. But one of the earliest Beastmen we actually meet, or rather fight, is actually one from Farum Azula itself, and is part of his name. It found its way all the way down here by some unknown means, and it shows how ferocious it is by slaying all the soldiers of Godric within this cave. Upon defeating said Beastman though, he drops a Flame Drake talisman. The talisman itself is pretty interesting, and its description reads, "Talisman depicting a red ancient dragon. The ancient dragons who ruled the prehistoric era before the Erd Tree would protect their lord as a wall of living rock. And so it is that the shape of the dragon has become symbolic of all manner of protections." Now, at first one would think that they might be carrying fire protection talismans to fight against dragons, especially since the dragons we encounter early on breathe mainly fire. But it's more likely that the Beastmen actually worship the dragons, and we'll see a lot of evidence of that in Farum Azula. So we'll come back to this once we get to Farum Azula. Another place we would find Beastmen from Farum Azula is near the Bestial Sanctum, in Grael's Dragon Barrow, deep below the earth. This time there are 2 of them, and I'll be honest, I have no idea what they're doing here. But once again, they drop a Flame Drake talisman +2. Other than that, they seem to be snacking on something. There's not much else to talk about with these 2. The one in Limgrave was a bit weird because it was very far away from anything concerning Farum Azula. But these ones could have come from the Bestial Sanctum, which houses Gurranq the Beast Clergyman. The sanctum itself has these mummified statues of beastmen and a gargoyle protecting the sanctum itself. Not that Gurranq needs protecting, if you know what I mean. But what's really interesting about the Beast Sanctum itself is that this isn't the whole sanctum. In fact, this room is but a small part of the giant sanctum. If we go down here, we'll find that the sanctum itself is actually a huge structure. But sadly, we have no clue who built the sanctum or if there is any way to enter this large structure, and whether there is anything within or not. But we do know that it has the same architecture as the one from Farum Azula, just less creepy. Now down here, there is this eerie area where we find the Cinquedea weapon. And this weapon is very curious as it tells a little bit about the history of the Beastmen. And it's basically a retelling of the weapon's history as well, which is very interesting. So, it is a short sword given to a high-ranking clergyman of Farum Azula. This design celebrates a beast's 5 fingers, symbolic of the intelligence once granted upon their kind. I know the mention of 5 fingers is weird. Honestly, whenever I hear different numbered fingers, it always gives me pause. But I think this is simply indicating an evolution given to them, giving them the means to create and form a new civilization by giving them 5 fingers. This is further supported by the bestial incantations given to us by Gurranq. One of the descriptions say that it is said that in the time before the Erd Tree, stones were the first weapons of the beasts who had gained intelligence. With their new intelligence and evolution, they use stones as weapons instead of their own claws. The real question though is who granted them this intelligence? Was it Placidusax? Was it the Greater Will? Was it an outer god? Or maybe even Queen Marika? I'm not sure, but maybe we'll find out the answers in Farum Azula. In any case, the Bestial Sanctum itself is but a taste of what Farum Azula will give, and in order to get to the floating mausoleum in the sky, we have to burn ourselves, or if you're heartless, burn Melina at the Forge of Giants. After which, we are teleported into Farum Azula by an unknown means, and Farum Azula itself is crumbling to a large storm and time itself. It houses a multitude of dragons flying everywhere, as well as ancient dragons within the mausoleum itself. Its architecture is similar to that of the Bestial Sanctum, with the difference that beastmen are buried within the walls. Or more appropriately, they might be infused into the walls. Now, remember the talisman we talked about earlier? It mentioned that the dragons would protect their lord as a wall of living rock, which is definitely a reference to the ancient dragon's scales being literal stone, and the fact that their corpses are also used as the foundation of Farum Azula, which is why it could be that the beastmen worship the ancient dragons. The beastmen ashes even tells us that the beastmen guard Farum Azula, and we see them guarding it in a literal sense, but also in the same way the ancient dragons used to protect their lords, by becoming a wall with their bodies, which may be the reason why you see the walls and architecture of Farum Azula filled with the corpses of the beastmen. We even find later on the statues of the beast clergymen next to the statues of the ancient dragons. In any case, walking around Farum Azula, we'll find a lot of living beastmen around, but their supposed splendor and intelligence seem to be lacking now, and they seem to have reverted to becoming more bestial in nature. Their weapons are also fairly interesting, as they seem specifically built for their physiology. Its description reads that it's a fairly balanced weapon and is easy to use, and from how they use such weapons, it makes them very maneuverable in combat. So the weapons themselves were tailored for them. Even their shield, which is literally half a jar, says that it's specifically built to be a shield. So I'm guessing they build a whole jar and then cut it in two? Or something like that? I don't know. They adorn themselves with jewelry, but they don't wear any armor or clothes like Gurranq or the beastmen that we saw in Limgrave. But there are some beastmen here who do wear armor as well. It seems to me that their intelligence is slowly fading away over time, but their bestial nature still makes them very dangerous, as they are very maneuverable, and they can even cast incantations of red lightning, which are the ancient dragon's special techniques. Further beyond this though, we would also find beastmen who are part of those who live in death. Question is, what killed them? Starvation? Maybe they were killed by a certain other faction that's in here? Well, in the next, we find banished knights who seem to have encroached this area, and the infamous Godskin duo. Now, I'm not sure if the banished knights are in league with the Godskin apostles, or if they're here separately. It does look like, however, that the banished knights are protecting the Godskin duos, or maybe they're trying to prevent them from leaving this area. I am honestly not too sure. But they may have been the ones who killed the beastmen that live in death, or they may have died a long time ago. Now this area is also especially interesting because if you look at the walls here, there are depictions of what seems to be humans who either lived alongside the beastmen or ruled over them. as we see depictions of the humans within the walls, specifically one that looks like a family and may have been the ruling monarchy of the humans. The family is depicted by what looks like a king, a queen, and a child. Now, who is this? Honestly, I can only speculate, but I think it's likely that they might be Numen. The child might even be Queen Marika herself. But we'll get back to this later on when we talk about Maliketh. But after beating the Godskin duo, we find this ancient dragon's head that is around the size of Grail or Gransax, but not much else about it. This dragon doesn't have a body and it's just a head. It may have been long dead, as this was called the Dragon Temple. I don't think the Godskin duos killed this dragon, and they can't even use it for its skin because ancient dragons have stone skin or scales. The question is, who is this dragon? We sadly don't get a lot of answers here, as with everything else in the lore, but maybe we can come back to this guy in the future when we talk about the dragons themselves. Moving on from the Dragon Temple though, the next area is rather interesting, as many have pointed out the dead dragons within the walls. Now the prevailing theory here is that it's the Dragon Lord himself, Placidusax, because of the face and the horns and the gold stuff. The theory goes that after we defeat the Dragon Lord within its time tornado vortex thing, its body gets left behind, and over time it fuses with the mausoleum itself as the mausoleum cracks away due to time. But this doesn't explain why the vortex would still be there if we already killed Placidusax in the past. So I'm not convinced that this is Placidusax himself. There are too many wings anyway, and there are multiple bodies, and there's one separate from the others on the other side. I think these are simply ancient dragons embodying the idea of using their bodies as a wall to protect their lord. But I could be wrong with that, it's pure speculation and we'll never know. Continuing on from this room, we find Deathroot. This may have been fragments left behind when the fragment of the Rune of Death was stolen, or death magic leaking out from Maliketh himself. Either way, this would affect the beastmen and put them in that state of undeath that we earlier saw. And we would find more of them in this area, which looks to be like a small city or town that housed the beastmen prior. We can even find some beastmen here that are hanged from trees. But there's nothing really here that would hang them that way, because they have no enemies in Farum Azula. So it's actually more likely that they might have hanged themselves to maybe try and get rid of the state of undeath that they are in. Maybe they're unable to accept it, or maybe they're looking for a way out. We even see one beastman fairly interested in the golden seed and the tree that's sprouting from it, maybe looking for a way to rid themselves of this curse of undeath. Side note, the trees here are actually made out of stone as well, which is pretty interesting but also weird. How do they grow exactly? I have no idea. Moving on from this area though, we find a Crucible Knight who seems to have felled an ancient dragon. This Crucible Knight may have fought two ancient dragons actually, as the other one that we see right after this area already has low HP when you fight it. I mean, Crucible Knights are pretty damn strong. After that dragon though, we'll find more beastmen protecting this area, and we would find a lot of them slaughtered. By who? Well, the recusant Bernal. He invades our world and we fight him to the death, as is the code of the recusants. After beating him, we would take all of his power. Now he carries two things that are fairly interesting that involves our topic for today. One is the Blasphemous Claw, which allows its user to parry destined death. But the other is his armor. Now what is interesting about his armor is that it's called the Beast Champion armor. Does it have something to do with Farum Azula or the Beastmen? Not necessarily, but its description may portray the thoughts of the Beastmen and why many of them serve a lord. It reads, "Beastmen are drawn to champions and to lords, and this armor befits a champion worthy of becoming a lord." And that is what Bernal was. which may apply to the beastmen, hence why they serve the Lord of Farum Azula, and why they protect the talisman that Bernal was about to take, the Old Lord's Talisman. The talisman depicts the Lord of Farum Azula, Placidusax, and visiting his chamber within the vortex and beyond time, we'll find that it was indeed littered with beastmen, who used their corpses as walls to protect their lord. We also see a lot of corpses who may have been waiting for the return of their god, like Placidusax was. But again, we'll talk about the Dragon Lord in his own video. Bernal, like I said, also dropped the Blasphemous Claw, which can help us beat Maliketh the Black Blade, hopefully, who we have to challenge next. But he's guarded by a Dragon Tree Sentinel, or he could even be here to make sure Maliketh doesn't escape. You may be thinking, how the hell will a Tree Sentinel stop Maliketh from escaping? Well, Maliketh is another power entirely. When he wields Destined Death, sure, he's probably the most powerful non-god being in the lands between, but as Gorank, I think a Tree Sentinel, much more a Dragon Tree Sentinel, can stop him. And I think Maliketh would only willingly wield Destined Death if it was going to be taken from him like he did when he fought against the Tarnished. But now we can challenge Maliketh the Black Blade, and after a grueling battle, we can talk about him. He is Queen Marika's half-brother, which is very weird because he's a beast. But according to the Remembrance of the Black Blade, Maliketh was given to Marika as her shadow. He is also known by many names like the Death of the Demigods, and he is famous in the lands between for being one of the most powerful and skilled beings in the land. So much so that many fear him, and those who challenge him were called champions, for anyone who did so knew that their very lives were at stake. But the thing that I want to focus on a bit is how is he Queen Marika's half-brother? Now, this is all speculation, but in the room where we fought Maliketh, we'd find a depiction of an Elden Ring with additional tendrils onto it. This might be an old form of the Elden Ring before the time of the Golden Order. And below this is a young girl surrounded by 3 wolves. This might be Marika and the progenitors of the Beastmen. Marika and the Beastmen might not be related by blood per se, but they might be related in terms of their evolution. Throughout our tour of Farum Azula, we found a lot of beastmen, corpses or otherwise, but not a lot of humans. We did find a few, yet humans were depicted within the walls and one that looks like royalty as well. What if the humans were only royalty and they ruled over the beastmen alongside the Dragon Lord? When their god abandoned them, the Dragon Lord went into a slumber and the humans found a new outer god in the form of the Greater Will. Or rather, maybe the Greater Will found them. Friendship between dragons and humans is nothing new in the lands between. Godwyn was friends with Fortisax, and organizations like the Ancient Dragon Cult exists. So it's possible that these humans, who I think could be Numen, might have lived here. And remember, Numen are long-lived but seldom born. The Greater Will chose Marika because she was an Empyrean, and when Marika rose to power under the banner of the Greater Will gave her half-brother to be her shadow, either as a way to keep her in check or simply as a weapon for her to wield. This resembles the way Ranni was given her shadow, who is Blaidd. Now, I held off talking about Blaidd till now because Blaidd isn't the same kind of beastman as the ones from Farum Azula. Blaidd specifically is a half-wolf. He is not referred to as a beastman. He also doesn't have the same features as beastmen and instead has more of a human body with a wolf's head, and seems to be a creation of the Greater Will itself as a shadow to keep Ranni in check. He is also immortal in a way, as if you kill him in the start of the game, he will keep coming back, and mentions that shadows cannot be killed.
You're strong of arm, but ask yourself, what harm can be done to a shadow? Didn't I say? No harm can befall a shadow.
There's one more thing that I have no idea why, but after killing Maliketh, you can still find Gurranq in the Beast's Sanctum. Now it could be Farum Azula time shenanigans, but that's just weird because you freed the Rune of Death. We also know that Gurranq is definitely Maliketh because of the dialogue that we get after killing him.
Why wouldst thou gull me? Why? Shit.
Not to mention that we can see the Rune of Death on his hand as Gurranq. So I'm just not sure how Gurranq is still alive. Maybe it's the same way Blaidd is still alive for being a shadow. But if you have any ideas, please do let me know in the comments down below. These shadows, Maliketh and Blaidd, are fiercely loyal to their Empyrean, as long as they don't stray from the path of the greater will. But apparently, Marika betrayed Maliketh somehow, but we don't know regarding what. But it also seems like the greater will has no interest in the beastmen whatsoever, aside from using them as their tools. Why? Probably because the beastmen are very loyal to their lords. Even Blaidd was extremely loyal to Ranni even after she betrayed the greater will, but with the curse cast upon him, he would go insane. So the beastmen might have been harder to control than the humans, so the greater will abandoned the beastmen as well. Just remember though that that part was pure speculation. But that is pretty much it for the beastmen of Farum Azula. Let me know what you guys think about the beastmen in the comments down below. And do you think that my theory about Queen Marika and the beastmen has some truth to it, or it's pretty far off? We'll be going over the other stuff, including Placidusax and the ancient dragons of Farum Azula, in future videos. If you like that video though, please do hit the like button and comment something down below. It really helps out with the algorithm. And if you're new to the channel, welcome. Please do hit the subscribe button if you want to see more content like this. And as always, thank you so much for watching.